Hi guys, this is Brent, Productivity Coach, and welcome to part 2 of our discussion of depolarization and polarity. So, I believe this will be just part 2 of 2, although I reserve the right to make a third part after, because I can't emphasize enough how excited I am about this material of polarization, depolarization, congruence. There's so much promise in this subject matter as I've been exploring it and getting into it and sort of cultivating it, seeing how deep it goes, seeing how it can be applied to all sorts of many different conversations. It seems like there's some really nice implications for the stuff that we're getting into. And so I want to take this as far as I can. I want to take this as far as I can go. And I want to keep experimenting with this and keep telling you about it, because I think we can actually use this in a really radical way to find self-control. And as I was detailing in part 1, not the type of self-control that comes from this triumphing over ourselves, trying really hard, pushing a boulder uphill and finally subverting ourselves into submission, wrestling ourselves into submission so that we do all the right stuff, but instead taking on this sort of new school form of self-control that's more along the lines of self-cooperation, of a willingness for all the different aspects of ourselves to work together in harmony so that the machine operates smoothly without friction, so that we can really go as far as we can in a single lifetime, and to move into the experience of being a live player in the Samo Burya sense, if that appeals to us, or even just simply getting in control of our habits. That's perfectly fine too, but the key being in polarization and polarity. So as I was reflecting on the last video I made, so reflecting on the first part of this series, it occurred to me that there are some elements about this that are somewhat new and are somewhat radical when we talk about habit control. And so much so that I feel slightly uncomfortable as I talk about this because of the possibility of this being misinterpreted and misapplied to someone's detriment. So for example, you might be listening to this, you might get the wrong idea about what I'm saying and then use this technique in the wrong way, and that it would not end up so well for you. And it's really concerning for me, and it's something that I really, really want to avoid. And so in the first video, about half a year before that, when I attempted to talk about this, I was really sort of pulling my punches a little bit. I was kind of saying it, but not saying it, and kind of negating myself. And even in the first video, like I was telling this story about how I gave up smoking, and it was like really, really cool and really exciting. But then at the end, I was like, oh my God, I have to like lay down this caveat of proceed at your own risk. So what I want to do now is I want to just, lay out I just want to lay out sort of a foundational terrain of forewarning, for both of our benefits, so that I can actually lay out what I'm thinking, and it can be properly bracketed with a sense of, go at your own risk. And so that's the basic idea. So please do take this at your own risk. Please realize that as I'm talking about this is a work in progress, that it's imperfect. Both the body of work, this discussion of polarization and depolarization, and my transmission of it, like my teaching it, is not guaranteed to be totally accurate. So if you're resonating with what I'm talking about, and if you feel you want to apply it, please do so with caution and at your own risk, never allowing any of this to negate your own intuition, your own knowing, and to consult the proper professionals if you're going to do so. So if you're going to do something crazy with like your diet or with your body or with your mind, make sure, if you're at all on the fence about any of this, like consult people who are able to really steer you in the right way, and then incorporate this material to your own, to a way that makes sense for you. So I would really, really encourage you to do this, and yeah, that should do it. That should do it. So yeah, so with all that said, yeah, please go at your own risk and use common sense with this stuff. So good. Okay, that's a good foundation. I feel good about that. And so now I can get into the discussion. So we left off with this last video about me giving the story about how I gave up smoking, and there was all this triumph, and there was all this, oh my God, like I think I've stumbled across something huge. And so I've started applying this to other areas of my life, and one area of my life that I applied it to is sugar consumption. even longer in my whole life. So for basically my whole life, I've been somewhat of a sugar fiend, a sugar addict, in the sense that I love it. Like I love candy, I love chocolate, and whenever it's around, I eat as much of it as I can. And for the bulk of my life, it would be without any restraint whatsoever. Like, what's the point? I'm healthy, there's nothing wrong. But then as I kind of get on in my years, I go through my 20s and I'm now in my 30s, I realize, oh wait, there are consequences to what I eat, both in the present tense and down the line. As I become older, my habits will really influence how my body ages and my health. That I realized I want to get on top of my sugar consumption habit. And it was only when I realized that I wanted to do that I realized how difficult it is to get in control of my diet and my sugar consumption habit. It is no joke. And I've tried many, many times to get on top of it, with some success, but ultimately kind of coming back to like generally a square one with it. So I've had some stints of being able to get in control of it. And then when more recently, when I started playing with this idea of polarity and depolarization, I thought, okay, well, let's do this. And so I started throwing myself at it in the same way that I did with the smoking, which is to say, I was like, okay, I'm going to, for the first time, eat sugar, eat candy, but without any self-consciousness, without justifying it to myself. So in other words, I'm not spinning a rhetoric in my own mind about why, like, it's okay for me to eat sugar and I can get away with it and it's not a problem and everybody's doing it and it's not that bad and whatever. It's just a little bit like, finding different ways to explain to myself that it's okay and it's justified to eat sugar. So in other words, I did away with all of that. I put all of that to the side and I just ate sugar to my heart's content, like as much as I want. And so I kept going, and this continued on for about a week, and I would just, like, bags of candy, I'd eat. And then just like with the smoking, I found myself slowing down. So like, okay, I kind of hit this point where I'm so congruent with the sugar eating, with the candy eating, that I'm trying to eat as much as I can. I'm like, trying to put it in my mouth. And I get to this point where I'm holding a little piece and I'm just like, I can't anymore. It's not, I really want to put this down. And I put it down. And then there was a period of time, quite a long period of time, where I didn't have any sugar at all. And the same thing happened with the smoking piece, where it wasn't a willpower thing, where like I swore it off. I'm like, no more sugar, like I'm done. It's more like I'm gonna eat more sugar as soon as I want to, or like there's no restriction being placed on it. And I just noticed that like I didn't want to. And so it lasted for a little period of time, but then the effect wore off and I found myself going back to sugar. And so now I'm kind of in this sort of nether region where I find that there is some permanent effect that came as a result of that experiment, in the sense that I want sugar less than I did. So the addiction has been resolved to some extent, but to another extent, it's not. It's still there, it's still operational, and I find myself still craving sugar. So this is a work in progress. And so I was kind of wondering why did it fail? What went wrong? And I realized that there's a secondary element to the depolarization process that I want to share with you now, in terms of how to use the principle of depolarization to get in control of your habits. And it works like this. We study the cycle of habit setting. So we study the cycle of habit setting, and we learn its different phases. And then based on each phase, whatever phase we're in, if we can be congruent with that phase, that's how we can depolarize and then reclaim our ability to just be in control of our actions. So that's what I'm going to explain now. So the cycle of habit setting goes as so. We'll start at like, I want to do this from your perspective, from left to right. Okay, so here's time. That to me is backwards, and for you is the right way. So we start with section 1, which is we are at some sort of neutral stage of our habits. So say, let's take a different example. Let's take the example of daily meditation. So suppose you want to create a habit of daily meditation, and you are where you normally are with meditation, which is, say, maybe you don't do it. You just don't meditate regularly, and that's where you are. So maybe you watch a movie or watch a YouTube clip, or you observe somebody in your life that is a meditator, they're like really spiritual and they really inspire you, and it makes you really want to meditate. So you want to be like this person, you want that quality in your life. You're like, I want to meditate. So you meditate, or you start not meditating and you take on a habit to start meditating. So you're like, okay, I'm going to do this every day for the next 30 days. And so you move into stage 2, which is you actually start doing the thing. You start introducing a new habit, a new behavior. And in the beginning, it starts with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of energy. And there's like sort of like this like surge of motivation that comes and carries you, because like you'll just feel really good. You'll receive like just a nice, kind of burst of energy and sense of accomplishment like right away. And you're going to be like, we typically identify with the habit at this time. So we go like, oh, like I'm a meditator now. This is great, and it's so easy and I love it. And I should have been doing this the whole time. And we have all this enthusiasm. So that's stage 2, the enthusiasm stage, the motivation surge stage. That's number 2. And so then number 3 is when, we've kind of hit this crest. And then now the energy is starting to shift in such a way where we're still doing this habit, but now it's starting to require more willpower over time. And this period of time could take, say, a couple days or a couple weeks, a couple months. It really depends on what you're doing, and it depends on the circumstances. But what you find is that over time, there's just a little bit more of a hump to overcome in order to get yourself to do this. You have to kind of try. You're noticing that you're becoming increasingly reluctant. You may also notice that whereas before you were getting like immediate results, like you're just like, wow, feeling so spiritual and amazing. And now like you're not increasing so much anymore. You're still making gains, but the gains are kind of relatively small compared to what they were originally when you were just kind of skyrocketing up. And yet the call to your old pattern of behavior, which was not meditating, is like kind of pulling you back. So in this stage, we can call this the ebb stage or the decline stage, where there's sort of a sense of trying harder to maintain the effort, and yet the results are being diminished. And it just feels like your enthusiasm is just kind of declining, and it's just kind of going downhill until you reach stage 4, which is a place where you're doing less and less and less until you're basically not doing it anymore, but you're kind of still saying that you are. Like, I wonder if you can relate to this experience of like setting a habit where you're actually not even doing the thing anymore, but you're saying that you're doing the thing. So it's like, oh yeah, I meditate every day. But like in reality, you actually haven't meditated in a week. If somebody were to be like, oh yeah, like how many times did you meditate over the last 7 days? And you're like, well, not like the last 7 days because I've been really busy. I don't know, but like I meditate like kind of as a thing that we say, even though we haven't been meditating. I wonder if you have an experience like that, because I resonate with it, and I think it's a pretty common thing. So that's sort of when we're not doing it. But then there's this sort of like dissonance that builds up, a cognitive dissonance, because we're like meditating, but we're not actually meditating. And then finally, the final stage would be when we realize, like when there's just such a cognitive dissonance that we give up. We give up on the habit. And we're like, okay, I'm not actually meditating, and I give up, and then we kind of chill, and then that's the cycle. And then eventually we'll find, maybe a couple weeks or a couple months down the road, we'll be inspired once again to start. We'll be like, oh, right, meditation, I love this. I used to do it. Why did I stop? And we get back on. And then that's the whole cycle. That's how the whole thing goes. So the key to habit setting is to go through as many of these as we can. We want to go through many of these as quickly, not as quickly as we can, like just as numerous of them as we can with as little downtime as possible. Such a rookie mistake that all of us make when it comes to habit setting is that we believe that whenever we get on this one cycle, especially when we're in phase 1 or 2, where like we have all this energy and inspiration, we start to become attached to the effort, and we think that this one effort is supposed to be the thing. Like we're attached to this attempt. Like this attempt needs to be made permanent. And if we drop it, then it's like just such a crushing failure because we've associated so much importance and so much significance with this one particular attempt. So that's the wrong way of going about habit setting. What we want to do is we want to go through many, many cycles instead, not putting undue significance and weight on any one given attempt or one cycle. So that's a really cool thing to realize. So one thing that really causes us to slow down, one thing that really creates a lot of undue downtime in our cycles is when we are not congruent with any one aspect of the cycle. And so if we can address that, if we can sufficiently depolarize around the cycle in terms of where we're supposed to be, then we don't get stuck, then we don't get stickied anywhere in there anymore. And then that way we can go through these cycles and then start to bring on the habit, let the habit take root, let the habit be installed into our personality for us to keep. So, again, like how important is this, right? Like if we can unlock this, if we can lubricate the process of putting habits in place and keeping them, how much power is there in that? There's so much power, there's so much benefit. It's like name the habit that you want and we can have it. So, I guess I want to mention that so that we can treat this like kind of with like due consideration. So cool. So I'm just going to sip some tea here and I'll continue. So, okay. So, stage one being when like, okay, we're at kind of the starting square. Stage two is the inspiration, willpower, energy phase. Stage three is the ebb phase when like, it's like more effort, but a decline, like you're getting less results. And then, at the bottom, stage four would be like a total, like there's like no results anymore and nothing's happening anymore. And then really we just get stuck here until we can get back into stage one again. So those are the stages. So stage one, fortunately, when it's very easy to be congruent with that. Stage one is not the problem. Stage two is not the problem either because we have all this energy and all this enthusiasm. Now, when we get to stage three, that's when things get tricky. Because the mistake that we made in stage two was that we started getting attached to the attempt. So the first thing that we can do, one main takeaway that you can take from this video is that, would you be willing to never get attached to stage two ever again? Would you be willing to go into every single cycle and every single attempt and keeping your eyes sufficiently along the horizon where you hold in knowing that even though I don't have to be optimistic about this one attempt, I can be long-term optimistic. I can know that I'm going to reach the destination as long as I keep at this. So that would be one major thing. Because if you can do that, then when you get to stage three, which is the ebb phase, the decline phase, the part where like the rest of your body and personality is starting to get whiplash because over here, there was an equilibrium, there was a homeostasis, everything was known, everything was routine, our brains had the proper grooves for our routines. And so here we've disrupted everything. And so the gravity is trying to pull us back. Can you be in stage three and realize that there's nothing wrong and there's nothing to blame yourself about, and it doesn't mean you're failing. And there's a certain likelihood that the desire or the gravity to come back to stage one will be so strong that it might be too strong for you to withstand, despite your best efforts and your best intentions. And the reason why this is so important is because if you don't grant that to yourself, that kind of level of understanding and that level of holding space and appreciating your effort, then what will happen is you won't be able to properly integrate the experience. You won't be able to properly integrate the lesson of what has happened. And you and you'll be like, you won't be able to refresh, you won't be able to move through the cycle to get onto the first part again. So you'll kind of get stuck there. And it's really disrespectful as well to assume that you're withholding, or to assume that you're not trying hard enough, to accuse yourself of not trying hard enough, when really there's just like a gravity, like your animal gravity is pulling you back into what is known. So much power in being able to see that come on, and to surrender into it. Like, to the point where it's like, okay, you've given your best, you've given your absolute best to what you're doing, and to recognize that, and then to let go, and to realize that if you let go, you're not letting go of the whole thing. You're not taking your eyes off of the horizon. Instead, you're allowing the animal part of you, your homeostasis, to adjust and acclimatize, and to incorporate what you've done, so that when it comes time to go back here, there will be enough of a precedent, enough of a memory in your brain, that when the energy does come back, as it will, you will be able to go further. You'll be able to take the whole thing further and longer. And pass even further across that threshold. And then what you'll see is eventually, through these cycles, you'll go further and further and longer, and with more and more power, that the gaps, like the downtime, will just get smaller and smaller and smaller until they disappear, and then this habit becomes your reality. That's how this works. So that's how to be congruent at stage 3. It's like you come out as far as you can, like right to the edge, and then realize nothing's wrong, gravity's pulling you back, it's okay, relax, it's fine, it's fine. You've done good. You can congratulate yourself. You can appreciate yourself. If you give that sort of congratulatory appreciation to yourself, it's not going to make you lazy. It's going to make everything lighter and easier and keep you clear. So then, of course, we pass through the low ebb, like where, so there was the decline and now there's no energy anymore. And at this point, it doesn't really matter if you want to meditate. It's like, for all intents and purposes, we can't. Because even though maybe it's like, okay, somebody puts a gun to your head, okay, I can go and sit down and you can do it again. Like, that option is there. There's something about being at this phase where it's just, there's nothing in you that can sustainably do this anymore. And so now the real trick is to become congruent with that. Can you become congruent with that? My wife's about to get on a call, so I have to speak in like kind of a lower voice, my radio voice. So, okay, we're going to talk like this now. But yeah, so like that. Can you be congruent with being at the low ebb of your energy? And here's the tricky part, and this is kind of this is why I wanted to put all of these like kind of warning and caveats in at the very beginning of this video, because what I've been doing and what's been working is to give myself the gift of going into the old habit. And so what I'm not doing is, I'm not saying, oh, I'm just going to go back into this old habit and I'm going to check in the time here, I'm going to do it forever, and I'm just going to like, and I deserve to go back into eating candy or not meditating and not being spiritual, or I'm not going to conclude that I can't, or that there's no benefit, or that it's not important. I'm not going to conclude or rest anywhere with my convictions when I'm in stage 4 down here. Instead, all I'm going to do is just allow myself to gravitate back to my old way of being, and to let it be okay, and to release any contraction that I have about it. So to release the judgment, to release the fear, because there's going to be a lot of fear here. Like, oh no, what if I'm going back to how I was? What if I lose all my progress? What if I gain all this weight back? What if I can't come back from this? And what will it mean if I lose all of this ground that I've gained, right? And so that's where we get caught up, because then that's how we stay in this kind of psychology of like, I'm doing, like, because we want to mentally hang on to the prize of I meditate every day, or I work out every day, or I write 3 pages of my book every day, like whatever it is. We want to hang on to it because we're so afraid to lose it, and we're afraid of what will happen, what it will mean if we let go of this. But if we let go of it and just totally release it, and allow ourselves to find our new center of gravity. What we'll find, what many of us often find, is that on one hand, yes, like we do go back into the old behavior that we were attempting to escape, but not as deep as before. Not all the way. Or even if we do, it's like only for a day or something before like, again, from zero effort applied, zero effort, like we're finding where is the center of gravity. We find we're just not how we were anymore. A change has been made. And you can see that change, that change that resides in you effortlessly as a result of your work. And that's a really profoundly interesting thing and rewarding thing to see if you're willing to give that to yourself and surrender to it. So like, obviously if we're looking at the graph, it's like, okay, here's like success. Like I've been meditating, right? I've gone from here to here, and now I've slid down all the way down to here. But the bottom of that little dip is not as deep as it was before. And that's what we're doing, because we're moving this graph up that way. So you give it to yourself and you really relax, and don't worry, because all this worry comes up. Like, when am I going to get back on this horse? I have to get back on the habit. I have to get back on the habit. I'm falling behind. Oh, it's so terrible. I hate all this, right? If you can let all that go, then what you'll notice is that you can learn to trust that the organism, the animal, reclaims its energy, that you come back to homeostasis. In a way, it's like, can you trust? Are you willing to trust that you can move from stage 4 back to stage 1? Because if you can, then you can allow this cycle to carry you. And there's a really beautiful balance between willpower, personal will, and like a surrender to your animalhood, a surrender to your energy, a surrender to that which is outside of your control. So over here, it's like will. It's like will pushing a personal imposition of my will on top, over the universe. This is my leadership over my life, right? And then it runs out, and then let's see where we end up. Then we relax, and then through that relaxation, through that night, like there's like a nice day and night kind of metaphor here too. Through that night, there's a relaxation and an incorporation of the experience, so that we make what this was into what we are, so that we start over here and then we can add more effort on top of that. So that's habit setting, and so that's how to use depolarization and polarity in order to make these habits work. So again, like when we're polarized, it's like the polarization is like, I have to be here. I must always be here. This is who I am. And down here, this is not who I am. This is who I left behind. This is the shadow me. This is the bad me, the wrong me. Do you see? And you can see how it's like, yeah, like obviously we want the habit. We want to put the habit in place. That's true. It's true. But if we start making like, this is good and this is evil, and this will lead me to like, I'm trying to push myself into heaven, and I'm trying to avoid the gravity of hell, well then we can't move through the cycle. We're moving too slowly, and the habit comes on too slowly. It's by depolarizing, it's by collapsing the polarity of that cycle that we can zoom out and see the bigger picture and go, oh, I see. I have to go through just a boatload of these. That's how we do it. So that's the principle of habit setting. I think that's good. Yeah, we can cap it here. It's holy crap, another long one. I'm really I didn't even notice time going by. It's really cool. So that's it. If you found value in this, please hit like, please subscribe, share this content. Help me reach this content to as many people as possible. If you want some one-on-one work, there's the $5 session, it's below. If you want free training on sustainable high-level productivity, it's below in the description. And I reserve the right to change my mind, but I may put up part 3 because I think there's one last piece I want to get to, and then we'll be done with this section for now. Thank you so much for watching. Okay, bye.